This is JJ Humphrey and Bobby Cleveland, and we are back on Elephant in the Room, where we love to discuss things that other people aren't talking about. We keep it to Oklahoma normally, but every once in a while we get on federal politics. It seems like more and more we're having to stay on federal politics because it affects us as Oklahomans so much. What's going on right now, whether it's the Biden investigation, whether it's what they're doing to Trump right now, or the budget. But today, what we're going to talk about is the border. And Bob, I just got back from the border, went down there on Thursday, arrived at Thursday at McAllen, Texas. And again, we went out on Big Ranch, went with Border Patrol and Highway Patrol and a lot of these sheriffs from down there. The next day they took us out. We had one day full of classroom stuff. And then the next day they took us out on the actual Rio Grande. And if you've ever seen, I shot you some of them pictures a while ago. I don't know if you got to look at them about us on the boats with the firearms, the big guns, and all of that kind of stuff. We went down that river, and what I was just blown back from was the cartel houses right there at McAllen. You cross that Rio Grande, and all of those houses along that riverfront, man, they had your jet skis out there, party barges out there, I mean, big places, big houses, big buildings. Heck, half of them looked like a daggum amusement park out behind them. They had slides and those blow up houses and stuff like that out there for kids and stuff. And it just not what you would expect. And what they told us was all those cartels had guns and people up there watching when you're going back and forth to where, and said they had some pretty, big ammunition, military grade ammunition and military grade guns that they're sitting there watching you, that they could take you out or that they could cause a lot of problems. And so it was very interesting. The further you got down the river, you got down there 10 or 12 miles and you started seeing little bitty shacks. I mean, when I'm talking shacks, but up there closer, they had some really, really impressive, properties and houses and big fences, and they come down on the river. Not what you expected right there. So pretty interesting.
Bob, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, it sounds like it's pretty interesting. Did you see any of them crossing over where y'all was at there?
What they told us, Bob, was that when we got there, that these cartels are very competitive, and that what one will do is drop the price to bring all these illegals over. And what happens is that the ones at Eagle Pass apparently had dropped the price, and everybody's going through Eagle Pass while we were down there, and they weren't going over where we were at that week or during that period of time. One of the things I found really interesting that one of the border patrols up there was talking about was that just how that a lot of other places are seeing, like over in Tucson and over here in this pass that we were just talking about, are seeing the young men, your Chinese type, other nationalities coming in, but that mainly right there where we were at, they were like double who they bring in on family units and non-accompanied children. And man, they had some stories you would not believe. One old boy got up and he's telling a story about driving down the road. In fact, we were out there by that road. He talking about that he was driving down that road early in the morning going to work, and that he sees this 5-year-old little girl and her brother that was 3. And he stopped and picked them up, and they took them to processing. And he said when they got their jackets off of them, said that they had numbers wrote on them saying, in case of emergency, call. So these kids' parents, and now, Bob, you think about it now. I hadn't been in South Texas a whole lot. I've been around Texas and but now that's pretty tough country. We was out stomping around there. You got a lot of stuff that poke you, and you know what I mean. It's a pretty rough country to walk through. And in fact, we were out there seeing one heck of a big rattlesnake. I was trying to get them kill it, and they wouldn't get out of that side by side. I was like, let me out of this side by side. So, anyways, the old snake got off before we get it. But anyways, he was talking about that these kids had their parents had let them go by themselves, and that here's this 5 year old girl taking care of this 3 year old boy. They get up there, they've got this written on them, and this old boy telling this, he's pretty emotional telling it. Anyways, he's talking about that he came back. He's like, hey, I want to check on these kids. It kind of bothered him a little bit. So he went down there, said this girl standing up against the wall, just arms crossed, watching over her brother. Said her 3 year old brother's down there sleeping. Said, while he's there, they brought him in some sandwiches. She went over and got sandwiches for the two of them. And he said he watched her. She cut her sandwich in half and gave the 3 year old his sandwich and half of her sandwich. And what he was talking about is, can you imagine walking out there in the dark, no food, no water, going across wherever, easy to get lost? Hey, ain't a whole lot of bearings out there. It's easy to get turned around. And, to come out on this highway, and here's this 5 year old taking care of her brother and all that, when most of us adults would have a hard time being out there in that kind of environment by ourselves, without food, without water. And here's a 5 year old turned loose on their own. Another trooper got up. I think it's trooper got up, and he was like, I think that guy's name was Joe, and he's like, Joe, you just brought back a memory. And he started telling about finding some kids in a wooded patch or in an area in one of the pastures that they were trying to search for people. Bob, where we were sitting there that night on the ranch we were at, a lot of people may have heard of King Ranch. We were not on the King Ranch, but we were on an adjacent ranch to it, and so that's kind of where the area we were at. And they were saying within about a 20-mile radius of where we were at, they had found over like 240 bodies just right there. They said it wasn't nothing to be walking out there and just find bones and find human remains. They acted like they talked like along that whole deal that they've had to get a medical examiner's office, where normally, like here in Oklahoma, we send everything to Oklahoma City. They said they had to get their own medical examiner down there on the border just because of the amount of bodies. And to hear them
was that on the which side was you talking about?
What's that?
Which side are you talking
Yeah,
about?
that's on the American side.
Okay,
So,
they
yeah, all
found
these
the bodies on the American side.
Yeah, what was unbelievable, Bob, and having a background in law enforcement and knowing kind of what sheriffs have to deal with and that kind of thing, and some of these counties, what I was just blown back that some of these counties were like 7,000 and 8,000 people. So kind of give you an idea. I'm from a really really small county, Atoka County, and we've got about 14. So some of these are very, very densely populated, large areas, but not a whole lot of population. And now, if you get into McAllen, that's a big city. But you get out where all this stuff is going on, and it's very densely populated. These sheriffs, hey, one of them got up and said they had fielded like 50,000 calls. And they got this little, and so Texas has, we were talking to one of the DPS, and they said at one time there was one guy that was talking, Joe. He said he was the only one for about 3 or 4 counties. And he said now they've got about 30 right there to help out. So they've had, so what's happening is Texas is having to pick up the cost. And you've got some more extra border patrol in there, but most of the cost is laying on Texas National Guard or sheriff's departments to come in there and try to do all this. And man, these people, that's why they wanted us down there, Bob, is because they are just like, hey, our country has, Washington, D.C. has forgotten us. And they are more, when you listen to them, they're way more supportive of Donald Trump. They ain't, every one of them, I mean, pretty openly would tell you, hey, Biden has sold us out. Biden is the entire, in fact, what you would hear them say all the time is that we have grown and that the Border Patrol has become a great agency over the last 99 years, and that Biden in the last 2 years has undone everything of the last 99 years. And I fully believe that. I mean, you don't have to be around these guys very long, and you don't have to, Bob, I told you about I went to cartel training through law enforcement, and it was pretty rank, boy. It was pretty bad, and man, they were cutting people's legs off, cutting their heads off, cutting their heart out, letting them see it. They was taking the chainsaw and chopping them all up.
That was the one about 6 to 8 months ago.
Yeah, Bob. And the ones that we saw the other day, hey, that crew I was with, they were talking about, oh my gosh, oh, this is terrible, terrible. I was like, well, it is bad. I mean, you sit there and watch a guy cut another man's head off. It's not too pretty. And when they just film it, and when you watch people trying to rape a woman on film, and I mean, would have raped her except they stopped it. And anyways, that's going on. And again, what's just unbelievable, this is going on in America. It's not just going on over there. It's not just over there, but they were showing just how that they use this kind of stuff. They will film going out there and cutting this guy's head off. And Bob, when you watch this thing, these people are just really, really calm. Because if you told me you're gonna cut my head off, or you're threatening to cut my head off, this boy ain't gonna sit there and just, okay, go ahead and cut that head off. No,
My understanding, they give him some drugs, so they don't really know anything.
Well, what they were saying was they do a lot of mock torture, that they torture these people over and over, and that they tell them they're going to cut their head off, and they do this over and over and over and over again until they just, what I'm saying, go ahead and do it. And they don't really think they're going to do it because they've been through this, 10, 15, 20 times.
Yeah.
So they're sitting there, and then finally, boom, they do it on film. And man, it's hey, Bob, it's pretty horrific to watch a man get his head cut off. And they do that to scare their enemies and scare everybody into cooperating or leaving them alone or doing what they say. And I will say it's a pretty effective. I mean, if you were living over there, or you were somebody that they were bringing in, hey, I'd be scared. People are scared of them, and rightfully so. There's some evil son bucks now. So it's Bob, the violence that you're seeing, whether it be rape, and that's what people aren't talking about. This is what I don't get, Bob. Where is this, at on media? I mean, why are you not seeing this type of violence? People get their head cut off, people being shot, people being raped, the rape trees that they have where they put underwear on a tree. So if they rape a woman, they get her underwear, they put it on a tree. People thinking, well, that's just 16, 18-year-old. No, it's from every age. I mean, they don't, young to old, and they put them underwear. So if one guy's got 16 pair of underwear hanging on his tree, the other guy's got 15. Well, he's got to go out and rape 2 women to be able, and I assume they're women anymore. You don't even know. But Bob, that's the kind human trafficking. They were discussing, how people come up here. They're paying them money. They're paying these coyotes and the cartel money to bring them across. But then they're having to negotiate to work 10 years in these sweatshops to pay that off. And they say, hey, they're going to check on them. If they ain't in there, they're either going to kill them or their families. And so they've got them. And Bob, we hear about uh, retribution and paying all these people who are African American or paying the natives. And Lord, man, we got more slavery going on right now. We've got babies being traded, sex trafficked, going on right down here, 9 hours away from Oklahoma, 9 hours from my house, 9, 10 hours away. And again, I don't know about everybody else, but that's too damn close for me. I can guarantee you. Uh, it's unacceptable. So, Bob, the big deal is my big takeaway from what I did this week was to know that hey, this ain't a Texas problem. This is a United States problem.
Right.
It's a worldwide problem. This is a evil bastards are down there, evil people, and we got evil people at the White House. Evil. Not talking about they're bad. They're evil, and they ought to be tried. I'm all for trying Biden for his illegal activities, for selling out the United States, for selling out our oil and our utilities and everything, selling out to China, selling out to Ukraine, selling out to all these other countries. But I'll tell you what, I'm for trying him for selling out our country and selling out us. He sold out each one of us, you and I. Bob, if you looked up, I pulled this up a while ago. I knew when I was down there, I was like, when I get home, I was like, what section is that? But if you looked under it, I went a while ago and pulled it up. I knew I kind of knew where it was. If you looked at Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution, go pull up. You can just go Google, write in Article 4, Section 4, U.S. Constitution. This is what it's going to pull up. And it's going to say the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union. That means all of us, every state in the Union, a Republican form of government. Right there, he has failed. The Biden administration has weaponized the DOJ. They have weaponized the FBI. They got emails this week. If you want to see whether the DOJ is covering up for Biden, go look at the emails they recovered this week where they're saying, hey, don't mention the president. President shouldn't be in these emails. Take the president out of these emails. They have the emails they've gotten this week. They've got other emails. So again, he has weaponized the FBI, weaponized the CIA, weaponized the FBI. And when you're talking about a Republican form of government, guess what? When you have those issues, you don't have that. And shall protect each of them against, guess what, Bob? He shall protect each of them against invasion. And so who's he talking about? The United States shall guarantee every state in this union a Republican form of government and shall protect each one of them against evasion. That means every state in the union has a part in this. If you let our borders, if you let the West Coast, if you let the East Coast, northern border, if you don't have borders, you don't have a country. And the president and the Congress's main job, one of their main job, is to make sure that this nation is protected against invasion. And I don't give a damn whether you're Republican or whether because I'm going to tell you something, Bob. Republicans have failed. Republicans are just as much. Where do you hear this week? I mean, they're sitting there arguing about, oh, well, the government might go unfunded. We might have to go home and not do. Well, hell's bells. You're talking about that, and then we're talking about sex trafficking. We're talking about children being abused. We're talking about our country being invaded by millions, and we don't even know who they are. And they're saying all kinds of nationalities coming in here, young men. I mean, what can 100,000 imagine what they did on 9/11 and how many? That was a handful. What's 100,000 Chinese nationals going to do in here? I mean, it's insane. And here we are. The Constitution guarantees them sorry suckers at Washington D.C. are supposed to guarantee this, and you don't even hear the bastards talking about it. You don't even hear them bringing it up. A handful are saying, "No, we're not going to approve this budget." And again, the Speaker of the House there. I mean, I know he's got his hands cut out, hands kind of tied and stuff. But again, I don't care. You need to be mentioning it and to say, "Oh, we won a great victory because we didn't get some money to Ukraine." Where's the money that you got for this budget for invasions going on? Nothing. Did you hear anything? Nothing. Man, they need whipped. They all need taken out and whipped, minus a handful of them up there that are raising Cain for it. And they're being made out. And Bob, you know this from working at the Capitol. When you stand up and you go against leadership and you go against the grain and you call out, guess what they do to you?
Oh, they try to shut you down, run you off, and tell you crazy.
Oh, absolutely. Bob's lost his mind. Bob's radical. Bob's a troublemaker. Bob's always the one standing up. Bob always is fighting against. Well, guess what? Anybody that tries to call this out, they make out to be a nut. And so when you're watching there in Washington and they're talking about, what's his name from Florida down there right now that's really making noise? Gates. What's his first name? You remember, Bob?
No, I don't.
Anyways, he's the main one. He was the main one that got the 20 together and held off McCarty to, to get speaker until he agreed to get all this done. Now he's fixing to call for him to be unseated. I don't think that'll happen. I think what's the Speaker of the House's name? Crud, McCarthy. I don't ever know if I'm pronouncing it right, McCarty or McCarthy. But anyways, they're wanting to unseat him because of stuff that we're talking about. And again, I don't know that we need to unseat him, but apparently, I know Washington's the same as our capital. You've got corporations, you've got state chamber, you got all these people who they dance to their music. And again, what's important for our state or what's important for the people, they don't give one rat's behind about. And that's what's going on up there. And you can see, look at all the problems that we have in our country, and where's their focus? Their focus is on them. Their focus is on their little pocketbooks right up there. And so, again, it's frustrating when you go down and you hear the people that are on front line. Bob, right there where we were at, on that ranch, they were telling us within a 20-mile radius right there that, and I forget what time period, whether it's year or last 2 years or something. Most of the stuff we were talking about during the Biden administration, last 2 years. But 240 bodies recovered. So I mean, if you put that in perspective, if you went from Atoka to over around Ferris to Center Point area, right here where I live, I mean, just a little 20-mile strip and 20 by 20, and you find 240, we might have 5-10 people die, murdered. If we have 5, that's quite a bit murdered in a 990 square mile area.
And these are kids too.
Oh, these are all women, children. They were talking about one of them was a pregnant woman that they had found, and the baby just all kinds of stuff. And they said, the animals would drag them off and stuff like that. And so a lot of times they wouldn't be right where they died. A lot of them are dying from just malnutrition. They said it wasn't nothing to pick people up and have to call ambulance, and they would be. We see these pictures of people with cell phones and nice T-shirts, and that's what the Biden administration wants to portray that as. Oh, hey, it's just a fun day out in the sun. These are great people coming over, and Bob, I don't know if you've been around illegal people. I've been around a bunch. I used to work in the horse racing business. We lot there. My sons work, and I as a probation pro officer, I've worked. Had a lot of jobs that I had people on that were not necessarily desirable jobs, picking up rock and those kind of things. And man, I've dealt with a lot of illegal people, and for the most of the ones that I deal with are really pretty decent people. They're hardworking, they're respectful, they're generally family oriented. They're generally not criminal type people. But then guess what? We are getting a lot of the cartel. We're getting a lot of gang members. And Bob, me and you were talking before we went on about the prisons and all the stuff going on in prisons this week, and how many here in Oklahoma that we've had just all the whether it be rapes or whether it be violence or whatever's going on. But guess what? A lot of that is behind gang problems. And guess what? I read some statistic, and I don't know whether that's increased because I went back and looked at that. Uh, I think that was back in 2016 when I first came in, that 16% of all at that time, and I figure it's way bigger than that right now, but 16% of all the federal prisoners were illegal, uh, aliens from Mexico, and there was like 4% was from other nationalities, 60% from Mexico, and that's going to be young men mostly. I mean, that's going to be men. Their prime generally going to be the ones going, and again, you're going to see a large portion of those gang related, and so whether it's an issue of human trafficking. Bob, you want me to tell you where I'm being told one of the biggest corridors for human trafficking is?
Where?
69 highway runs right through Tokyo. You've been on it many times.
Right.
And I'm told that's one of the main corridors for human trafficking. And again, people are going, well, how does this affect us? We're in Oklahoma. You let that down there, let them take care of themselves. Don't affect us. That's a lie. It does affect us because this is our country. They aren't going to stop at the border. If we don't stop them there, they're going to end up on our front door. And Bob, guess what? One of the things that we kind of got tickled because we had a lot of Oklahoma people at this. So there was about 20 of us that really more than that, probably 25 with our sheriffs. So we had Oklahoma sheriffs, and we had a bunch of representatives, about 19 or 20 representatives. And anyways, they got to talking while we were out on this ranch. We were in there and having a meeting out there on this ranch. They had a kind of covered shed out there, and we were all under it and talking. And anyways, one of them got up and said, "Man, we used to stop a lot of marijuana coming through here. It used to be just gobs and pounds of marijuana." And he said, "We don't see a lot of marijuana now. Now we see the hard drugs, talking about heroin, talking about methamphetamine. Fentanyl was a big discussion." And so they were going, and we ain't figured out why that we've seen this reduction in marijuana. And we were laughing, going, that's because Oklahoma and other states, it ain't just Oklahoma, but other states have legalized, so they don't have to try to get their marijuana across the river down there and across the border with all that border patrol.
You're growing it here.
They just move up here. Guess what? The cartels are in Oklahoma. They're growing weed, whether it be Chinese cartels, whether it be Mexican cartels, and we have one of the largest illegal marijuana productions in the United States, and I'm told the world, and it's right here. So you don't think cartel ain't smart enough to not have to fight 30 border patrols, 100 border patrols down there? No, they just move up here. They buy the land, they buy the dispensaries, they illegally sell it out the back because we're too stupid to stop them. And we're so stupid that we voted that, thinking that was going to be something that was going to stop illegal, and that it really was for medical purposes. Um, but, anyways, it's here. And so that's what we've got. So, guys, whether it's something like that, Bob, I don't know if my numbers are right, but I think if I read somewhere that the Vietnam War that they had somewhere about 57,000, I think, killed during the Vietnam War. 60, just rounded off, say 60,000.
Right.
Now I was really young during that period of time. I mean, like really, really young. And I don't remember how long that spanned over, but it was several years in there. Somebody told me 15. I don't know. I think that would be the Korean and the Vietnam War. You know, might have spanned 15 years, but 60,000 killed over that span. Korean 36,000, I think. Combined two, and I think it spread over 15 years. Please go back, and some of you guys that fought in those wars, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I've read it all. I can't remember it, and I just a small child when that happened. And but over that period of time, roughly combination of the two wars, 90,000 people, maybe 100.
You
One
know,
year.
I remember back in 2015, 2016, actually 2014, Daryl Weaver was over Oakland Bureau of Narcotics,
Hmm.
and he was talking about child trafficking at that time, and we never really heard of it. We didn't think it was going on here. He's telling us it is going on here, and now, of course, Daryl's a state senator
Hmm.
and a good senator, one of the best senators we got up there.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
But he was talking about how many people are human trafficking and the number of people, and of course, we didn't know any different. We had never heard anything about it.
Yeah, and just example of how government works. You got a guy like Daryl Weaver. I just want. I'm so sick of government. I just gonna start. That's why we got this elephant in the room talking about what nobody else talk about. But Bob, you bring up a great person. Good point here. But here's a guy in Oklahoma who knows about human trafficking, who knows about drug. He was over the agency who dealt with all of this stuff. And what's our current leadership in the Senate? They take a guy who's never done any of that and they make him over public safety and bump Weaver off. When here's Weaver knows more, and I know quite a bit, but I would always on those type of issues. I mean, Weaver's somebody I'd be calling that now. I call the current one. I got a good friend. Me and Bob's got a real good friend, Donnie Anderson, and Donnie's the head of OBN now. But Weaver had that job, so you don't dismiss what Weaver says. And Weaver keeps up with all that being in his Senate position. So you better listen to what Weaver says. But just like that, here we are, Senate. They bump him off because he won't do exactly what they say, because he don't he's not a team player. And the reason he's not a team player is because he's standing up for the people of the state of Oklahoma. And again, he ends up kind of being out on the outcast a little bit. In my opinion, that's just mine. We might have Mr. Weaver on here. He can give his own opinion. Mr. Weaver might not agree with me, but from where I'm sitting in the cheap seats, that's the way it looks to me. But Bob, the fentanyl that's going on, and again, for people who don't know what fentanyl is, If you've ever had one of those painkiller patches, if you've ever heard of morphine, oxycontin and all that, it's a synthetic heroin. It is an opioid. It is highly, highly powerful. It is highly, highly addictive. 1 pound can can produce masses enough to kill many, many people. And the Chinese are pouring that in there to the cartels for a little to nothing. And the cartels are cutting all of their drugs, whether it be heroin, whether it be cocaine, whether it be methamphetamine. They're cutting these. And here's the deal when they cut this and what we mean by cutting it. So if you had a pound of dope, so if you had a pound of methamphetamine, you take a bunch of this fentanyl and you mix it in there with it, and now you got 2 pounds. So now you got twice as much product, and you got this other for almost nothing. Now, the problem with that is when you mixed it up, you didn't go to a pharmacy to get that. They just throwed it out there and mixed it. So one time you might do a little methamphetamine and you're fine. The next time you do a bump of methamphetamine with a massive amount of this fentanyl in it, bam, you're dead. They're lacing it on other stuff, whether it be marijuana, whether it be all kinds of products. I was told not too long back, a couple on vacation, and the girl come out and they're married and come out and picked up $1 and was bragging to her husband, "My lucky day, I found $1." And they're getting in the car, and he said, "Hey, I just read an article where they're putting fentanyl on this money and throwing it in the parking lot. You better not be picking up money." They get in the car. She starts having a convulsion. He runs her down. They have the Narcanon. Bob, I'm thinking about getting Narcanon, just carrying it around for me because you don't know where you're going to run into this stuff.
Right. Well, it's big in the prisons. It's you would think it. When you
Getting
get to
all
prison, you think they know better than to use that fentanyl, but they still do it. They still that Narcon saves
Bob,
many lives.
hey, here's the deal, Bob. China is declared war on us. The Mexican cartel has declared war on us. They have killed 107 to 110,000 people in the prime of their life, ages like 19, 48. I forget the age group that they were talking about.
Right.
But it's prime. It's not people who are 80, who are sick, who need painkillers. No, it's your 19-year-old kid. It's story after story of a mom who raises 2 kids who are on honor roll, who've never been in trouble, and they have a graduation party, and both of them happen to smoke something or do something, and now both their children are dead. Or the kid who never touched anything one time, dead. And Bob, this is a story all over the United States. It's not just here in Texas or border. Bob, I've got people. I know 2 or 3 people that's died. I got called last summer by one of the police officers, and I used to work a lot of drug stuff, and I've just been very active, drug court and probation. So I've worked a lot of that. So police call me and say, "Hey, we had a kid," and I know the kid well. I've had him in drug court, and I know his whole family. I mean, both sets of grandparents, parents, everybody. I know them well. They're great friends of mine, and the kid was a great friend of mine. And so, anyways, he had done some drugs, but he was running. The police were chasing him. He was running one house, turned on a water hydrant, drinking water, and then they'd chase him, and he'd go to another house, turn on the water hydrant, drink the water, goes to about 5, 6 houses like that, and they finally find him unconscious, water hose, he'd been drinking water, he's out, and they take him to the hospital. He never recovered, and he died, and they were calling me and saying, "What kind of drug do you think this is?" And I said, "Well, you know what? I'm going to almost bet you that it's ecstasy." And the reason is ecstasy will heat your core. I mean, it will heat it up. Your brain, you'll drink so much water. Basically, it's your water can become toxic if you take in too much, and basically it drowns your entire system, and it'll kill you. And so that's what it sounded like to me. And I told them that, and they called me back a short time later and said it was ecstasy mixed with fentanyl. And now, Bob, most of those, you don't ever see that pill form broke down, reprocessed, or what they did, they put it in originally in the pill process, but they're mixing fentanyl, and again, it makes their product go further. But it's insane as to what we're seeing and the amount of fentanyl. We had one guy from West Virginia who was a federal prosecutor, and he come in talking about just the amount of fentanyl that they had seized, that his office had seized. And I forget how many people he told that was enough. It was up in the millions, I think, that that was enough. What they had seized was enough to kill him. And especially if any of the law enforcement people, if any of you correctional officers, and all the people that's got to work around this, you need to make sure you're wearing your gloves. Used to, I would have never wore gloves if I had to work around a lot of this stuff, going in and do searches. I would probably be looking at and make sure that when you're taking your gloves off, that you wash them or you clean. Because if you get it on your gloves and then you handle it, if you get that enough of that, it can kill you. And so again, it's a sad day that we're going to need every one of us. I was visiting with the guy last night, I think, night before, and I forget where he had been, but he had won, and one of the things he won was one of these Narcanon kits. And he was laughing. He's like, "Well, I'm gonna send it up there to the school, I guess." And after he talked to me, he goes, "You know what? I ain't send that to school. I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it here. You don't never know when one of our kids or something might need it." I was like, "I'm gonna tell you something. I'm about half-assed thinking about going to get me some and putting it in the truck or keeping it somewhere where we would have it around us in case we need it. But Bob, they've declared war on us. It's a biological war, and it's an economic war that they are making millions and millions. They're destroying our country. They have killed 110,000. I just give you the numbers for the entire Vietnam and Korean War combined. Over that entire period, we've had more Americans killed in 1 year by this. And these sorry bastards at Washington have not declared open war. Our borders are being invaded, and they haven't declared open war. And Bob, I'm laughing. They put out, I got a deal right here. I don't know if anybody can see that, but I've got a deal that says that we've got about 136,000 illegal aliens living in Oklahoma. There's roughly about 47,000 U.S. born children, to illegal. We have illegal households add 41,766 students. Now, Bob, you remember when me and you were in the legislature together, and you remember old Doc Ritz?
Yeah.
You remember when the media they went after old Doc Ritz. I laughed, and old Doc, he could take it. Doc wasn't scared of nothing. But he had come out because we were getting a number, and we were being told that at that time, and that would have been 2017, Bob. So at that time, we were being told that there was 80,000 illegal students in Oklahoma. And if you remember, I don't know if you was in the room that day when old Hoff, people call her Superintendent Hoffmeister. I call her old joyless Hoff-shyster is what I call her. But she came in the room, and there was three of us trying to get some answers from her. She wouldn't answer. I was one of them. And I was like, Well, let me just give you an
Oh, I
example.
remember that now, where
Remember
she's
that?
trying to talk to me.
And I asked her, I said, okay, how many illegal students? And she was, and I even told her before, hey, nobody wants your opinion. Nobody wants your opinion. We want a number from you. Just give us a number
Yeah,
without
we
all.
don't keep that number.
Oh yeah, and so I said, how many illegal students? We're not going to take them by the hair and take them back to Mexico. I said, I may agree with you. I'm 100% agreeing. I just want to know how many there are. Could you tell us so we'll know how to budget for it? And oh, the law says, I say, hey, look here, you ain't no constitutional lawyer. I ain't no constitutional lawyer. Shut that crap up and just give us the number. And you remember she turned around and
Left.
walked out of the room. I laughed, but hey, we were told 80,000. Doc come out with that number. They crucified him in the media, and a bunch of our own people crucified him.
Yeah.
But here's the deal: you couldn't get a real number. If that number was wrong, they're saying 41 now. I doubt seriously that's the right number. I'll bet that it's much, much larger than that. But Bob, if you just want to go with the 41,000, if you have a regular student, just a student in Oklahoma, we figure about $8,000. Now I hadn't looked at that number here lately. That may have went up quite a bit because that's the number I had from a few years ago. And we know under the Biden administration, with Biden economics and all that, the Bidenomics, I guarantee you everything's went up about double. So I don't know what it costs to educate anymore, but that number was 8,000. And if you had somebody who could not speak English well or couldn't speak English at all, it went up to about 9,000. Well, if you take 41,766 and multiply that times 9,000, you're going to come up with 300 something million, I think. It may be more than that, I forget. But, you know, uh,
Well, we think we don't think much about the border. We hear a little bit about it, but we don't really know how much that affects us. But it affects everybody in the United States. It's not just the people on the border.
well, what they're saying is that every illegal in Oklahoma, and we've got a bunch, like I say, I gave you that number. According to them, I think their numbers are way low, 136,000 people. And you figure that each one of those people costs us 4,278 per illegal person, you know. And again, they say that it's 474.9 million, which would be, I mean, close to 500. They're saying $500 million on the education. I think it would be higher.
That's the budget the DOC has, $500 million.
That's your entire budget for DOC. Yeah, pretty much.
I guess you know what? When you start looking at their budget, it'd be a good ideal to look at how much money are they putting on fentanyl? How much money are they figuring
Oh
it's going to
yeah,
cost them?
yeah. And Bob, I don't even figure they're figuring that in. I figure they're just saying, okay, if we have a illegal inmate in the Department of Corrections, then he costs us this much. But how much are we spending on Narconon because of what you're saying?
Yeah.
How much are we spending on medical because of what you're saying? Are we having to have extra gloves? Are we having to have protective gear? How many are we losing any officers? If you're going to talk about what is the actual impact of what these people are costing us here, Bob, I don't even know that you can figure it. If you start, I don't know they can put a dollar amount on the things we're talking about, but you and I both know that's real. We're not making up a scenario. They have. If you go in right now, fentanyl, one of the biggest problems in prison right now, all over. It's not just Oklahoma. It's all over the place. And the havoc that just wreaks on them. And again, that's one aspect that we're talking about. And Bob, what they're giving for police and legal and corrections. So police, legal, court system, all of that. They're saying 110 million. Again, I think that's low. And they don't offer amount on the public health care, public assistance, general government services. So that's just two that they're saying about half a billion and 110 million with law enforcement. What they've got is the whole deal. They figure about 782.9 million. So you might as well say 783. And so 783 million is what they say here in Oklahoma. I would guess that estimation is astronomically low based on my experience with government and what I've seen.
Okay, they claim they don't keep track of it. Now, I find that hard to believe, but they don't keep track of the illegals that come in here.
Bob, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a bill that says every agency will make a report on how their agency is impacted by this illegal activity. And again, we didn't even begin to talk. I don't know if they put. I doubt seriously if they put the medical marijuana business under legal. I figure that'd go under medical because they don't like to put themselves. And again, if you want to talk about that all day long, I would love to talk to Bobby Anderson. I mean, Donnie Anderson, not Bobby Anderson, Donnie Anderson, and say, do you think that 110? Because I figure Donnie Anderson could probably tell us all kinds of stuff that are millions and millions of dollars that are impacting our state. And again, when they say general government, and you go, well, how has it affected general government? Well, let's just talk about how it's affected federal government. And guess what? We started off talking about how our federal government has failed because we're going to have to budget. Boom. And that's your federal tax dollars going down there. So we ain't even started talking about that. But yet, guess what? They're going to be held up and we're going to look at not getting a budget passed. Why? Because they won't give the money to secure our border. So here comes a major problem. Guess what? It's going to be one of the biggest topics in the next presidential election, if not the biggest topic that's being talked about. And again, here's what's amazing. It will be the number one thing that Trump's going to talk about. One of the biggest, I will guarantee it'll be in his top 5 things to talk about because he knows what's going on. Yet you don't hear all these other people avoid talking about it. You don't hear Washington talking about it. Here we are being invaded. We're about to lose our country. And these low-life sons of bucks up there are not even addressing the problem. They need whipped. They need whipped. You got a handful up there. I'm going to brag on Josh Burkeen. Josh Burkeen is definitely, if you listen to his stuff, he's addressing it all the time. Josh, if you hear this, if you're listening, anybody sees him, tell him we appreciate the reports he's given on the border and about what he's seeing there in his job. And so again, if you think it doesn't affect, but bring that back down here to Oklahoma, guess what, Bob? We're talking about legislation. We're talking about our state budgets. And again, you've been a big part of that and how we're figuring how do you budget and when they're coming in, whether it be corrections, which is something me and you know a little bit about, how do we make sure that we've got this money and that money is taken away. And when we see that we're having to spend more, that means our employees are getting less. And it just goes on and on. This is a vicious cycle. And again, Bob, we talked a little bit on the human trafficking. I don't know whether one of the things that I was impressed with, and I think you went out and watched that movie, didn't you, Bob? That
I did.
Sound of Freedom.
Yeah.
And hey, if y'all hadn't watched it, I want to encourage you to get out and watch Sound of Freedom. And here's one of the things I was impressed on: the people down there that were working that border, these sheriffs, these border patrols said, hey, y'all go watch that movie. What they're reporting on that movie is going on right here in America, right here on your border. This is going on. And it's just something that's just mind-boggling that you can have your sheriffs, you can have your border patrol, You can have your highway patrol. And Bob, me and you grew up in a different time, but used to, man, if you had a highway patrol in your community, most of the time that guy was going to be a pretty respected individual.
Right.
Sheriffs the same way. Law enforcement, period, were generally highly respected people. You know what I'm saying? And now we got these people down here, and I guarantee you, these are some good folks. I spent the week with them. You ain't got to be around them very long, and hey, they're out there trying to protect America. I mean, I'm going to tell you, Bob, I've been around sheriffs all my life. Sheriffs always, my county, my this, they're all about their little area that they cover. Hey, you didn't hear this from these. These guys are working together. I mean, these guys have come together because they've realized they can't do it alone. And that's why they called us, because they have said, we give up on Washington. We're reaching across the aisle. We had people from Montana there. We had people from Colorado there. We had people from Connecticut. Boy, the sheriff from Connecticut can bring it. I laughed at old boy. And he's got some impressive picture of deer. I'm going to go up there deer hunt with him. But we had people from all over Georgia. Them boys from Georgia. I like the sheriff down there. He's classic. And anyways, we've got.
Tell us about, share with us a little bit about the bills that you would like to introduce.
Well, one bill I've got that I want to try to introduce, and I've already written in to Latoya. And again, there's 20 of us down there, so we'll just see who gets what filed. But one of the bills I'd like to do is to declare that the cartel is a terrorist organization. Now, why have we not already done that in the United States? What do you got to do to be a domestic terrorist? If we got photos of you cutting people's heads off with a Bowie knife, I would call you a domestic terrorist. Instead, Biden office wants to say J.J. Humphrey is a deplorable and a domestic terrorist. I laugh. We got an insurrection that they claim, an insurrection without a firearm, no firearms, insurrection, and they're putting people in jail over that.
Wait a minute, they had a firearm because they shot a young lady.
Had a firearm and shot somebody. That's the only person got killed.
We don't hear a thing about that.
Don't hear nothing. A police officer puts his knee on a guy's neck who's got fentanyl and methamphetamine and a criminal record out the wild zoo. And yeah, we burned half of America down on that. Hell, a veteran, person who gave their whole career to the United States to defend and protect the United States, shot, killed with nothing in their hands. And again, we don't hear nothing. But here's the deal: I'm getting off a little bit. It just pisses me off to be called a domestic terrorist.
We'll get back to the bills you got, and we got to close it out too, JJ.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know we was getting close, Bob. But what that bill would do, it would give. It would call them domestic terrorists. It would let us seize every bit of their property, deport them back. We got to start declaring that. And so I've got bills like that, whether it be in human trafficking, whether it be in financing, whether it be to fentanyl being if you are caught trafficking fentanyl or human trafficking, I want to make it death penalty. I'll probably put them out there. So I'm going to run some bills like that just to say I'm going to put them out there, see where the rest of us are out, and throw a little mud on the wall and see where it hits. Bob, we could talk about this. We hadn't even really got to talk about going up the river, being on them boats. Did you get to see pictures of me and old cowboy? My twin, I got a guy looks just like me in the Senate. Me and him got to ride them boats down the river together. And we were out on side by sides on the ranch and stuff. But hey, I hadn't even got to talk about some of the things like that, some things that they told us. We could go on. I think people get it. We're under attack, guys. We are at war. They just haven't declared it. You need to call your Congress people and tell them enough's enough. Get off their butt. Let's declare war on these people. Let's save our country. We have to vote right. We have got to get involved. We're going to lose our country if we don't. It's all hands on deck. This is serious stuff. If you don't believe it, go down there and talk to some of them. So, Bob, it was really interesting. It was an educational trip, and I'm glad I went. And again, I think we at Oklahoma need to talk about what we can do. How do we help Texas, Arizona, and some of these other states?
Well, that's a good idea. We just talk about it again another time. We just never seem to have enough time.
No, no, Bob, we can talk about. I think we need to talk about the prisons, what's going on there. We need to bring that back. We
Well, I
got
tell
some.
you, I drove to Hinton, Great Plains. I can't remember that what day. I guess it was on Thursday. Yeah, last Thursday. So it was an hour and a half drive, and no more than get there. About 35, 40 minutes later, they were told to vacate it to get out. They're shutting us out. And I didn't know that was going on all across the state at the time. They didn't say why or what or whatever.
Sound-
But
It sounds like they're having huge, huge problems, and so it's going to be interesting. I think we could have a whole series on that. Bob, I'm going to be at your house next week with a special session on taxes, which I ain't did. I did introduce that bill on excise tax, so we may talk about that. We may try to put together a program while we're up there and do both of our programs while we're up there at the Capitol or
well,
something.
that's a good example where you once you put a tax in, it's hard to take it off. When you